Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. Becky Bain and I are here, and I, Deborah Ager, are here to talk to you about publishing your nonfiction book. Becky, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm glad we can come together with you today. We're just going to give you some good tips about the terminology and book design and self-publishing, editing, all those things that come together that gives us a little confusion sometimes. So go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, and we want to offer you guys a couple of things that that can help you in this journey to book authorship. The first one here is Becky has a checklist on self-publishing. So if you have questions about self-publishing and you're wondering what some of those steps are, Becky's checklist is extremely useful. It's free, so you can go to her website and get that. And then also related to publishing your book, I have a dream book launcher check. So if you're curious about what you need to do next on creating your book, what's the next best step for you? Right. These 17-ish questions only take about 2 or 3 minutes to answer, and they will help you know exactly what to do, and they give you personalized steps based on your answers. So let me get this out of the way, and then we will continue on. So we're going to be talking about, as Becky said, a number of the terms that people have, like what's a ghostwriter, what's a book coach, what's an editor, and what kind of editing might I need? And these are really useful terms to know because you will spend less money and less time, and you'll be more likely to get the services you need if you're familiar with what all these different terms are. So we're going to start off where I'm going to be talking a little bit about the book coach side and the editing side, and Becky's going to talk more about the self-publishing team, self-publishing process, book formatting, cover design, as well as other topics related to that. Did I leave anything out, Becky, or did I get everything?
You did a great job.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So I want to talk with you guys first about what exactly is the difference between an author coach versus a developmental editor or in a ghostwriter. So basically, a ghostwriter is going to write your book for you. A lot of times the way this happens is that they will interview you, they'll get the ideas from you, and they will put that together. This can be very expensive, as you can imagine, because it's also very time consuming. So celebrity ghostwriters charge, I don't know, in the neighborhood of 6 figures for this kind of work. And part of that is because, if you're a J-Lo or a Britney, you're more likely to be able to sell a lot of these books. So therefore, the ghostwriter is going to take a portion of that. And sometimes they'll also take a portion of the revenue as well. Every ghostwriter works a different way. So a lot of it depends upon what it is that they end up negotiating. Other kinds of ghostwriting for shorter books can be anywhere from $15,000 for a short book to $30,000. If you require the ghostwriter to research, to conduct interviews with other people and all that kind of thing, all of those will add to the cost. I do a lot of developmental editing with people where they'll bring something to me and they need it shifted around, and that costs far less because it's not ghostwriting. So I'm going to talk more about that so you guys can understand that better. So it's important to know from the start, what type of service will be most necessary for you. So if you already have a book written and you're pretty confident in the structure of it, you probably need one of the types of editing services in order to really polish your prose. And if you're just getting started, you might need someone who's more, of the book coach variety to help you get started, to help you know how to structure your book, and so on.
But you're going to also help them understand what they need, right? So if they send you a sample of their work, that's something that you would give them. This is what I think your book needs based on what you just sent me. So that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. People send me their writing when they're interested in working together, and I'll take a look at it, and then I'll give them I'll consult with them and help them figure out what would be the next best step.
Some writers don't understand what they need at that point. So that's helpful to know that they can just come to you and submit something. Yeah.
That's a great point. And I'm so glad you asked that for that clarifying statement. So thank you so much. So a developmental editor will often identify content gaps that you might have in your material. And sometimes when we're really experts with a book, or we're experts on a topic that we're writing about, it's really easy to have these gaps in knowledge in the book. because your brain is sort of filling that gap in, and it's very easy to think we don't need to describe something to someone. And so an editor is there to be another set of eyes, to sort of be the outsider who can come in and say, hey, have you thought about this? Will the reader understand that? And a good developmental editor will ask you these kinds of questions to help you get thinking about that.
The other thing that I've found is when my writers are looking for an editor, that sometimes they don't have a story organized in the way that it needs to be. So would that be a developmental editor that helps them get the story in order? Yeah. And that's very helpful for them to know when to put everything in, whether it's chronologically or by process. So
yeah, that's really good. That's really good to point out. And that can be an issue. And also sometimes there's a lack of stories. You know, sometimes an additional story can help further clarify a point. Right. Sometimes a story can add interest and capture people's attention. And so perhaps opening up with a story will make sense for certain kinds of books. But it's not necessarily, it's very individual per, you know, by book, depending upon the topic and the audience and whatnot. And part of developmental editing is recommending captivating stories as well, helping you figure out, hey, what, you know, have you thought about this kind of story or that kind of story? Or did you know when we were talking about your book, you were telling me a story about X, but I didn't see that in the book.
Yeah.
You know, so kind of like bringing forth more of that content. That's and awesome. helping them develop it, basically. So that isn't every last thing a developmental editor does, but it's the gist of it. And then an author coach will offer you comprehensive support based on wherever you're starting from. So if you already have an outline or you don't have an outline, if you've written 0 words or 50,000 words, an author coach will enter the picture where you most need them to and then take you forward from there. Cool. And I do that with people through my clarify, storify, amplify process, where we clarify the book's topic and the audience and the content that they need to read about. And then we figure out the stories, we get the book written, and then the amplifying is polishing it. You know, I give marketing consultation to people and help them go forward with their book from there. So, yeah. So, are there any questions or anything else that anyone has? Feel free to put it in the comments. And if we don't see it now, Becky and I can come back around and answer those in a little bit. So let's see. So yeah, so basically to know which one you need, if you take my Dream Book Launch Checker, that will help you know which one to need. And I can share the link to that in a minute, but that'll kind of give you the gist of that. Now, the other thing a lot of people wonder about is what are the 4 types of editing? And a lot of times people will say, I didn't even know there were different types of editing.
4 types rather than 3. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Becky, do you find like sometimes people are like, I don't know what kind of editing I need?
Right. They don't even know that there are different kinds of editing. They just assume all editors do the same kind of editing. And most often they actually are talking about proofreading. Yeah. That's what I find is they don't even understand the depth of editing that's done. So they're like, well, I just need someone to check the spelling. Well, not necessarily.
Right. And, you know, one thing I had happen to me with an author long ago is that they really wanted to proofread as we were going through and doing the developmental editing. And I cautioned him against that and said, it's not the best use of time and your budget, because we might find that we're changing that. And so you don't really want to put time and energy and investment into proofreading something that might not end up staying in the book. So first we go through the 4 different stages in order, and there's a specific order to them and they are stages, and you have to go through each stage in the right order or it's just not going to work out very well.
Beneficial in any way. So
exactly. So that first stage is a developmental editing. That's where we're sorting through the ideas and clarifying things. So I talked about that. The second one is called line editing. You can also, sometimes people call it substantive editing. And that is where you're going through and looking at the paragraphs and sentence structure. You're further eliminating repetition. You're smoothing things over. You're making sure the language is clear for the reader. And then in copy editing, you're getting into more detail around punctuation and grammar. And then proofreading is the very last stage, and is also the lightest stage and also the least expensive stage, because by then the heavy lifting is done from the other 3 stages. But in proofreading, you're going through and you're just checking to make sure that it looks it's clean as possible, that if you're referencing the AYZ method, that it always looks the same each time you reference it, You might be creating a style guide at that point to send off to your book designer and those kinds of things. So,
question about that, the proofreading. Do you recommend they do it at the point before you send it to the layout formatter designer, or do you do it after the designer's done? Which do you recommend?
I think it's great. I mean, I'd be curious what you think, but I think it's great to do it before sending it to a formatter or designer, because having the formatter or designer make the changes can also be costly, and they have to do it in InDesign.
Right.
The other nice thing is that I think it's always nice to keep a copy of your book in whatever format you like, whether it's Google Docs or Word, and to have that be as clean as possible before you send it on to the designer. But if the designer is like changing paragraphs around and changing sentences, you're not going to have that clean copy.
No. And we don't want to do that. We want it completely clean. So sometimes I kind of want to do a proofreading, like you just mentioned. Then I also need some good eyes on it after we're done to make sure we included everything in the right order that they want. Hopefully it's all in the right order. But there's been times when it's like we don't get it necessarily in complete order, and then we don't want to have to make that change later. So it's always good to have another set of eyes to look at it one more time. So,
right. And when you go through these steps in this order, it ends, I know I've said this 2 times already, but it's so important. It's really going to save you your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it's going to save me time.
Yeah, it's going to save time for everyone on your self-publishing team, and saving time is going to save the author money if the author is funding this. So that is a really important element to remember. And speaking of a self-publishing team, that's something that's really important to have if you are self-publishing your book, because you want to have people on there who are working together to provide a seamless experience for you, people who can communicate well with each other. And if you have to go around and find a person here and a person there to do all the different parts, then you, the author, have to become the project manager, which might not be what you want to do, because a lot of authors are busy people, right?
That's right. Right. And as far as the self-publishing team, I consider what we do as I do a lot of that project management myself as the designer, the cover designer, and the formatter. We work with the editors to make sure that everything, we've got the style sheet and all that stuff is ready. And then we also do a lot with our authors as far as building out the ebook. Then we also put together the book release advanced reader team. We also work on making sure that we handle all the uploads, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure the metadata is right. I want to make sure the keywords and categories are right. I want to make sure the pricing makes sense. And a lot of authors don't have that experience. And we've done it so many times that we are aware of what it takes and how quickly the process needs to be done. It also gives us a handle on making sure that we can see mistakes before they happen. So, we catch things. And if there are mistakes, and sometimes it's not necessarily mistakes as much as they're hiccups, because technology is what it is, that we're able to step in there and fix it quickly because we've seen it before, or we know how to problem solve and figure out what's going on. So having that opportunity to work with an editor, the author, all the different pieces is a really good way to have a self-publishing team that the author has control over, but isn't responsible for everything. The creativity that they want is in the book because they've hired the right people to do it. So, and
Becky has this tool available, the self-publishing checklist, that kind of goes over some of the things that she will talk about and has talked about. So, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the other pieces that a team needs to have and not every book is going to need an index, or every book isn't going to need an illustrator, but those are the other things that we help put together and make sure we find the right people to work with you. If you're doing a children's book, for example, you need the illustrator that's going to be just right for your story. And we've had lots of opportunity to work with illustrators, so we can help you decide whether the one you've chosen is right, or we can help you find the right illustrator. So that just having that expertise and experience can be helpful to get your book done in the way that you want it done, rather than trying to do it all by yourself. So and, we always work as, we are the cover designers. I usually do covers. And then we have my assistant is the formatter for the book. So we work in tandem to make sure the design flows from the cover to the interior, and make sure that they're already in the right formats for the upload to the book publisher. Now, usually we're using print on demand. So that's KDP and Ingram Spark. Sometimes we work with draft to digital, whatever we want. But, making sure that we have the books formatted in the way they need to be is super important, because that's when things can get really messed up. It's like, why is this book looking like it's supposed to? Well, you either forgot the bleeds or you forgot to make sure that you have the spine set correctly. And those are all technical things that need to be addressed as we develop the book. So just having that, making sure your typography is right. We recently had a book that has a lot of glyph characters, things that are not just typical, just parts of the alphabet. They're actually parts of the extra parts in the alphabet, certain symbols that have to be in there. And you have to choose the right typeface for that, or you're not going to have that available for you. And you get a lot of strange things happening in your typesetting. So you want to make sure you understand type and all that as well. And just making sure the font matches the genre of the book, and make sure it's going to work for the style, the branding, the cover that you've already chosen. So
I just wanted to add something. One of the things
Sure.
I think might be tricky for authors is that they'll work in Microsoft Word or Google Docs or Scrivener, and none of those is showing the format of a book. One author I worked with long ago, the one who wanted me to proofread, he wanted to put the items into this book format. The benefit of that is we could kind of see how things would lay out, how many things would be on a page. So that was okay. It wasn't a design program that would be really complicated to change the content, but it was a little bit complicated, but not as much as if it was in a design program.
Sure.
And anyway, I think sometimes when we're working in those documents, it's hard for us to visualize that we need to worry about a spine or the bleed or how close together the text might come, into the spine area and then or into the crease, and then
we just had a book that it turned out to be much larger than we expected, because there were so many pictures that we ended up putting into it. So we knew what the word count was, but then we had additional photographs that came in afterwards, and so all of a sudden we're like, this gutter is not big enough. So we had to expand the gutter to allow, because it was over 300 pages, we had to have enough space for that gutter. So, sometimes those things happen, and you've got to know the ability to make that change quickly. And InDesign has the functionality that you can make that change without messing everything up. So the page count didn't change. Right. But, having the software to do that properly is perfect. So many times people come to me and they're like, I ask, what's the word count? And they're like, well, it's 30 pages or it's 100 pages or whatever. And it's like, in what? And it's like, well, in Word. I said, so what size is the page? I don't know, whatever the page is that they give you, which is typically the default is 8.5 by 11. But if we're putting a book at 6 by 9, that's going to change everything. So we, just knowing those different things as we do it, I'm like, let's look down bottom left-hand corner, see how many words it is. And that'll help me figure out how many pages it's going to be at the end, or how we have to decide on the size of the book. Because if it's too big of a book and you've only got 30 or 40,000 words, you're not going to have enough room for a spine, the words on the spine. You're going to have a spine, but it's not going to have the room for the words, or it's going to be super tiny. So it's important to know from the beginning, the word count, so we can decide to put it into a book size that's going to be appropriate and have enough spine width for it. So, because you always want to have your book on the shelf with the words looking out at you. But that what we always have the opportunity is the opportunity to publish our books are super cool with self-publishing, because you can do anything. You can do print on demand. You can do commercial printing. You can do an ebook and make it a digital format. You can do, sometimes we've done, the ebooks are in color, but then the actual print book is in black and white, because we want to be able to save money on the print book, but it looks beautiful in color. So we make the ebook color, and it doesn't cost any more for the client, for the author to have that done. So there's so many opportunities with print on demand and self-publishing. And it just comes to what your end goals are. What is this being used for? Are you trying to just get your book out there and sell it on a platform? Or are you trying to have a book that's part of an entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, want to have a speaking gigs, and you want to have a book at the back of the room. So you want to be able to bring books with you. You can buy author copies at cost as a self-publisher. You don't have to do, 1,000 copies that you have to print commercially, but if you want to, you can. So, there are opportunities for that. So we work with a lot of different opportunities for our authors to do as many, think outside the box. What else could you do to be promoting your book or selling your book? And we help them develop that option wherever it can be. So,
That's fantastic. And I know print on demand gives people so much flexibility because, for instance, one of my clients was speaking for a large corporation. She needed 30 or 40 copies for the people she was training because that was part of, they were going to all take the book.
Right. That's part of the
learning.
Yeah.
And it was very easy for her to be able to get those 30 or 40 copies. And she didn't have to keep them around her house because it was all available on print on demand.
And, sometimes you get, you go through a year, you've had your book up and there's late breaking news that has an update to it. You want to add that to your book. You can do that as, you just re-upload the files and it can be done. Heaven forbid there's a mistake and it's, needs to be fixed. Down the road, you can upload the book again and get it fixed without having to waste any money over the print 1,000 that you have in the garage. So it's cost effective for sure. So
yeah, it gives you a lot of flexibility.
It does.
Here is, if you guys have questions about launching your book, publishing your book, then feel free to get the Dream Book Launch Checker. Answer 17 questions in 2 or so minutes, and you'll get some personal steps. And then Becky's got her self-publishing checklist. And one thing that I put this banner up earlier because a lot of people have this question: how long is a page, or how much is a page? And so generally, if you're using a 12-point font, Times New Roman is a standard. Obviously, a designer like Becky can change the font to something you like better, but sort of industry standard is using Times New Roman 12-point font. And so then usually it'd be 250 to 300 words per page. The nice thing is that when you double space in your Word or Google Doc, it's going to sort of end up being around 250, 300 words when you've double spaced it and used the 12-point Times New Roman font. So when you use standardized way of presenting your manuscript, you'll be able to sort of get a sense of how many pages your book is. But when you're working with people like us, an editor or a designer, they will always want to know the word count, because that's what really matters, is how many words is it overall, not necessarily how many pages, because you might have illustrations, you might have graphs.
And a lot of times we change the size of the font to match, if it for whatever reason. So, and different fonts have different sizes too. That's the thing. If you can say a 12-point font in Times New Roman and a 12-point font in Questa, which is one of my favorite fonts, a Questa is going to be bigger than that. So we often use a 10-point just because it's such a large font because of the way they've drawn the characters. So different typefaces will give a different result. So it's important to understand that it's not going to be exactly. So it's just know that the layout formatter is going to do a great job putting it together. So
yeah, I could talk about fonts far longer than anybody wants me to.
The going down the highway, seeing a billboard and saying, "Oh, I know what that font is." My husband rolls his eyes. Why would they use that font? Yes.
One Thanksgiving, I was talking with a book publisher, and he's like, "Oh, we talked about fonts." He's like, "I hope I didn't bore you." I was like, "Oh no, I'm totally at home in this conversation."
And then it's typefaces and fonts and typography and all those words that So the one thing we were going to talk about a little bit was publishing options too. I know we talked about self-publishing a lot, and that is something that I do. Majority of my work is done through the author wanting to self-publish. Sometimes we do work with publishers and help them with their design and turn it over to them, and they either handle the printing side of it, or the marketing, or both. So we work with publishers as well. But that's, those are traditional publisher, as people think of traditional publishing. Usually starts with having to have a literary agent. I think that's one of the gatekeepers that keeps traditional publishing out of most people's hands, is that there has to be, traditional publishers only take certain books that they know that they're going to be in their genre and are going to sell to their audiences that they have. So that's something to understand, that everybody is going to be able to go with a traditional publisher. There's the next, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to add a note that if you're looking for an agent, a great way to do it, there used to be a certain social media tool that was good for it, but now it's the one that's been, not working so well.
Yes.
But since that isn't really available as much anymore, and I'm not sure where people are going to congregate next, one thing you can do is look at other books in the space and see who the author is thanking, and see if there is someone who looks like they might be the literary agent. So
Yeah,
if you
that's a
see
great
something in
hint.
the business space or on
Mhm.
leadership or some other topic that you cover, that's one way that you can try to do some sleuthing to see what other literary agents might publish or might work with authors who are
Right.
writing about whatever topic you're writing
It's
about.
interesting you bring that up because that is also a great way to find an illustrator that you like.
Oh, yeah.
Is by going to the library or the bookstore and looking at children's books and deciding, this is the style I'm looking for, and then figuring out who the illustrator is and connecting with them directly. And that's, one way to do it. Similar to, a literary agent, there are agents for illustrators. So sometimes the best illustrators have an agent that you have to go through to get to get on their list or to find out what they cost or anything. So that's something more to be familiar with, that there are different levels of illustration illustrators that are out there that you have to, when connecting with. Sometimes you're not going to hear back from them directly, but it's an option. That is one of the ways. I ended up working with an illustrator in Rome, Italy, because the author had found her in a children's book in a bookstore and connected with them directly. So it was a very interesting project doing that. Another type of publishing out there today is hybrid publishing. And that's when both the author and the publisher share the upfront costs and the royalties as well. So they split the profits from the book. And it depends on the publisher, the hybrid publisher, how they do that. For me, I'm working with a self-publishing team. We are hired by the author to do the project. It is a project, and then all the benefits and all the profits go to the author. I don't benefit at all from that book once it's out my door. I'm paid upfront for the work I do or at the conclusion of getting the book published. So, I'm not considered a publisher. I consider my author is the publisher, and I'm just the team supporting them. I'm assisting them I'm the expert to help them make sure they do it right, to help make sure it's project managed and get it done. So,
yeah. There's two paths that are really interesting that with publishing. So one of them is that you can have your own imprint as a business owner.
Yes.
Or maybe you're thinking about launching, like sometimes I'm working with people who might be thinking about launching their own consultancy in 5 or 10 years, and they're gearing up now to get the book written. So this might be something interesting for you to consider. If you want to have your own imprint one day, you might think, oh, I don't want to do that. It's a lot of work. It's really not much more work than self-publishing your book. We won't go into all the details here because that would be another show. Yeah. But just it's something for you to think about, ponder, consider, see if it might be for you. And then the other way, of course, is if you did go with a hybrid publisher, you have to have budget in order to pay that publisher, and it's not cheap because they're doing a lot of work for you.
Right.
And a fair number of my clients will work with me first to sort out the ideas of their book. I help them outline it. They start to write it. They get the ideas down. Things are in a general structure. And then either they continue editing with me, or sometimes they might go on to a hybrid publisher at that point. And that kind of just helps them be able to take that first step. Because usually hybrid publishers aren't just going to take a nugget of an idea and help you develop it. Right. That's not really what they do.
Right. And that is something that I do often is I will have clients that call me and we connect and we sit down and just talk about where they are with their book and what they want to do. And sometimes they've had an editor already, sometimes they haven't, but they just want to know more about the self-publishing process. And that's why I put that checklist together, was so people knew that these are the steps that you need to follow. I don't want the book in my hands until it's been through an editor completely. You're first. And until I have that completely edited and signed off that it is done, all the changes have been accepted in the document and it's done, then I want the book. So, but I'm always ready to sit down and talk about where we could go from there, what the timeline is going to look like, what I'm always going to encourage people to, think about the marketing at that point, rather than waiting till, the book's about to be released. Now, how should we market this book? How am I going to sell this book? Because that is the other thing that's the author is responsible for. When you self-publish, you are also the marketing team. You're going to be the one selling that book. We're going to put together all your mock-ups that you need, all the marketing sheets, sales sheets that you're going to need. But in the end, it's your creativity that's going to go out there and sell that book. And it is your passion. So it shouldn't be looked at as a fear. It's just getting out there and telling people what this great book that you put together.
Yeah, and that's why. Well, so when I'm working with people on their books, I'm usually helping them. Well, what I do is I help them do that from the beginning, because we have an audience first approach. We focus on your audience and the content they need.
Right.
This is going to tie. If you do own a business, the book will tie into your business in some way, and if you don't, there's another method for that. But if this ties into your business, it's great, because stop trying to sell the book one by one, but keep doing the marketing for your business and have your book as one of the pedestals inside the marketing you're already doing. Too often, like, people get stressed out trying to sell books one by one. And so that's why I recommend, just do this marketing for your business, have the book be a part of it, integrate it into what you're already doing. And it takes a lot of stress off your shoulders.
A lot of stress. Yeah, that's awesome.
This is great. So any last thoughts before?
The other, just one more option there for those who want to do it themselves. That is an option to do it completely on their own. And I've seen people do it. It's a lot of work. So, I'm always, ready to help those who are in the middle of it and need some help, or, see how it all comes out in the end. So was there anything else we wanted to talk about?
Fantastic. No, I think that's it. So if you need, to assess where you are and you want some personalized next steps, feel free to take the Dream Book Launch Checker. Feel free to get Becky's self-publishing checklist. And it has been lovely to be here with you guys. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. Becky and I can circle back around, or message one of us if you need, if you have a question about something we talked about, or want to know more about self-publishing and creating your own self-publishing team. We'd be happy to talk to you. Any last words before we?
Just thank you for having this. It's been great. Enjoy talking. We could talk all day. I know we could, but it's great to circle in on these topics and keep going. So thank you very much, Deb.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.